So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Art Forum. If you haven't met me, my name's David Shiferaw. I'm the director of the Margaret Lawrence Gallery, and I'm the person that programs Art Forum. And it really is my pleasure to welcome you here to this session today. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm situated in. And I invite you to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which you're located. So for me, it's Bunurong and Wurundjeri land, which is part of the greater Kulin Nation. And for me, it's just lovely to ground myself in the knowledge that long before the University of Melbourne was considered, or before we had museums, or this thing that we know as, as an art school, actually there were people who practiced painting, told stories, shared knowledge, practiced song and dance on the very land that we are living right now. And it's, we don't take it lightly that we practice whatever it is that we practice and learn whatever it is that we learn on that land. And it's with great honor and pleasure that I acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. Our guest speaker today, Tariku Shiferawis, is a painting and installation artist. He was born in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia and raised in Los Angeles, and is currently based in New York. He's zooming in from New York, and it's nighttime there. It's like 10:34 or something like that there. So thank you so much, Tariku. Tariku explores processes of mark making that address the physical and metaphysical spaces of art and social structures. In his ongoing series, One of These Black Boys, he uses song titles by musicians from the African diaspora to title each work. And the songs range from hip hop to R&B, jazz, blues, reggae, and Afro beats. And in using these titles, his works present other reference points outside of the Western canon of art. Tariku's works been shown in the 2017 Whitney Biennial in New York, a poetical wager at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Cleveland, Unbound at the Zuckerman Museum of Art in Georgia, Men of Change at the California African American Museum, Los Angeles, and What's Love Got to Do with It at the Drawing Center, New York. Wherever you are tuning in from, please make Tariku very, very welcome. And over to you, Tariku.
Thank you, David, and thank you everyone for having me. I'm really excited to partake and just share my works and my findings up until this moment. I'd like to share my screen so that we have a visual reference of what I'm talking about. Can you all see it? Yes. So by the way, I was telling David earlier, I had lived in Australia for like 5 months in Canberra on a study exchange back in 2006. And it's been a very interesting experience, just having lived abroad for the first time as an adult outside of Los Angeles. And I feel like it has, brought me back around to speaking, even though I'm not there physically, but just speaking to an institution that's based in that land. I want to talk about some of the things that really feed my work, my interest, things that I'm most interested in, having grown up in Los Angeles and having moved as an adult to New York. Excuse me for 1 second. And in a sense, I remember, even in high school, I used to see all these tags all over the place. These tags I didn't photograph. I found them online, actually, but they resembled a lot of what I had seen growing up. And you would have somebody, write their names. Even my friends would, tag their names or their streets they represented, the neighborhood they represented, and then another neighborhood would come in and cross it out. and put their neighborhood in, or their name, their gang name, or whatever that is. And it was interesting, and visually over the years, I found it to be so normal that I just did not pay attention to it. And not a lot of people did either. And then while, businesses found it very illegal, and they wanted, and the city found it illegal, deemed it illegal, and they tried to paint over it. Yet the city has a way of marking the pavement too. Maybe not the walls, but the pavement. And it's interesting how you see these markings, especially when I moved to New York. They're ever more present, almost like an invisible layer of the architecture, like this layer of like marking that is almost just a part of your everyday life. And in New York, it's ever more visible because it's a city where you walk, you don't drive as much, you're taking the train. And so I found these markings very interesting, and since colorful, and just very in a way they had their own meanings. But then again, I was not invited to that meeting, right? And I didn't care either. I enjoyed the mere way these things existed. This was I took all the pictures of these pavement markings, by the way, and it took place between 2014, 15, and 16. And this was taken in Reno, Nevada, when I had visited a museum there in 2015. And I found similarities in different states, different cities. And and there's at a subway in New York, in Brooklyn, and this is in Harlem, and this is in New Jersey, in Newark, New Jersey, at a loading dock at a huge building. I guess it's somewhat pointing to an exit, the gate that you exited the loading dock at, or you entered at. Somehow I thought it was excessive, and I still thought it was interesting that they had this huge mark, or maybe they're covering something up. And then you go to Chinatown, New York, you encounter these shipping pallets, piled up everywhere you go. And growing up in Los Angeles, I had encountered those in various places, but not as much as I did in New York, actually, with those little trucks with hooks hooking into them, and beeping their way backwards or forwards, moving these around. Obviously, these were international symbols for moving commerce and commodity, but that's the way the heartbeat of a city goes. You move things into shops, and aesthetically they're engaging you in ways that you want them out of your way. You want to get to your class, to your work, to whatever that is. And I took those, but I found these online as an example of how these are just laid out everywhere, and they also outnumber us in human numbers versus shipping pallets. And then other things that I found interesting are these markings that are found through these cave paintings, ancient times, people that have existed way before we have, and the way they mark themselves into their society, what they find very significant to them, very important to them, from their belief system to what they valued in their societies, and how they interacted with one another, or how they lived on the land. And these were found, and I think carbon dated to about 40,000 years ago. And just to imagine that, we have, lived in so many ways, marking our ways through society, through existence, through history. It was very fascinating to me. It just, I was responding to it because I'm constantly asking questions of existence and how we've, come to be, how we've thought about things, and the way we've come to live in the current modern culture and society that we live in. And just finding these things are just very like pretty much a physical mark of I was here, I am here. And that was significant, and later shows up in my work in a very different way. As you go on, and one thing I encountered, like I said, I mentioned earlier, I had lived in Canberra for 5 months and traveled around Australia for a little bit. But it was later, over the next 10 years, that I started realizing how much of an opportunity it was to have lived there and to have encountered a different society other than growing up in Los Angeles. And these markings, these patterns that were made by the first people of Australia had resonated with me. And even though I did not understand it, or nor maybe I was not welcome to the meanings of it and the vast meanings of those sacred implications that it had, I still found that these were a way that had, showed the most significant thing, shared the most significant thing in their worlds, relationships, the way the boundaries worked between peoples, and the way the rivers flowed, and or the way the land is marked, and how they traverse that land. And for me, that was very interesting, thinking about these patterns and marks they had made, and that had very special and unique and sacred meaning to them. And now, as some of these people made art that is worldwide known, I just thought I would mention that as I go into some of my findings and my works that took place between 2014 and 2016, titled Markmaking. And in that time, I was just, inspired by everything else that had existed around me, and I wanted to mark the way these things. I wanted to use those forms to mark works that I'm making, to have meaning for me, for myself, and to engage a contemporary conversation of painting and installation works and sculptures. And in this way, I'm remaking these forms that really emulated these shipping pallets, not to size, much smaller for sure, and much weaker, non-functional, but engaging it in a way that I was thinking about painting and these structures, and covering them up in a way that you cannot access them visually or physically. And I went on. This was 2014. I made a large piece made of wood and this plexiglass, and painted from the back, where it has this, the moment you walk up to it, it's almost at height level, and it engages you with this reflection. And I was very much interested in the ideas of making marks through many ways. And then back again, just inspired by what I had seen, what I had encountered, just walking, like taking baby steps through the way I was thinking about these forms, these gestures, how geometric forms had existed for so long that they have so many different meanings. And these are not even geometric forms that I recognize personally, not even in the category that I have understood them, but they did some things that were very interesting. Even this blob that's, marking X, painting X. For me, I was just playing around with the idea of like X always crossed things out to a point. How about like if I just blob it out? How do you cross X out if X is there to begin with? And just messing around with the language of painting, the visual language, and just thinking about these ideas. And so for me, I consider X as a geometric form, and it made it easier for me to think about it that way, where geometric forms have existed for so long that they've meant so many different things in many different cultures, many different timelines, history, from religion backgrounds to different groupings of people throughout the world. And X was very interesting to me because X was a way of marking something that was dangerous, also marking something that that is, you're canceling something, you're negating something, you're erasing something, crossing something out. But also at the same time, X marks the spot. If you look at a map, you're marking a spot where you so desire to go to look at, or something that is so desired. So the dichotomy between the wanting and the rejecting also existed in that form. But in the English language, X is a letter where it, within the context of a word, it meant something, multiple things, many things. But in math, X was this unknown variable until it's found out. this unknown placeholder, a placeholder for the unknown. When that unknown is known, then X is no longer relevant. It's no longer X, it's something else. It's a digit, it's a number. And so I was going based off of those ideas when I was thinking about how X also is a unique form that marks intentionality. The moment you have one slash, a branch that's had fallen maybe, then it's just by nature or coincidence. But then again, the moment two things are crossing and they create that vertex, there's this intentionality, maybe a cross at a graveyard, maybe an X at a window or at a door, or something marking something. A thinking being must have been there to think and to show evidence that there was intentionality of their thinking as a result, a mark resulting in their thinking and their intentions. And I've often thought about that. And there's these other forms that had existed, like this falling shelter, that's more significant to the generations before me, the 1940s, 50s, 60s. People understand these as fallout shelter, where people hid away from bombs and everything. And I thought they were interesting. And so I tend to explore these and sort of just play some of this against this painting background. This dialectical relationship was interesting to me between these geometric forms and these organic painterly gestures that were marking the surface of the painting, and so forth. Messing around with more geometric forms that were a little bit more organic, and playing around with the idea of doing the same thing what X is doing in a different way. Like maybe the blotting of like that gray paint maybe does the same thing. Maybe it shows intentionality, maybe it doesn't. So it's just on my way to discovering like many ways of doing that, and I found that very interesting. Here you see two triangular forms put together. Maybe you might have seen it in your 1980s, 1990s VCR, where you rewind forward, you play a song and you fast forward through your iPad, iPod, cell phone, smartphone, whatnot. And this has marked a different culture, different contextually. It was doing something very different. And so I found those very interesting. But then again, when I came into this new body of work, one of these Black boys in 2016, I was sitting in my studio thinking about in 2016, how does one mark themselves into society after all of this have taken place in history in the past? And especially, how does a Black man like myself even engage the conversation of painting and even think about having a place in that history? And so in thinking about that, I was thinking how I need to show intentionality, how I need to, if I'm thinking about mark making with painting, engaging painterly gestures, then how do I do that? And so I come right back to X. And while X is super overloaded, and it was a form that I did not want to engage, not even in the arts context, because so many artists are using this form, but at the same time, it's used in so many different places. It's so overloaded, and I needed to find another form that showed intentionality. And for me, it was to deconstruct X into another thought process. For me was intentionality was shown through repetition. And for me, repetition came in the form of these horizontal bars, forms that could be deconstructed into deconstructing X into these, parallel forms, but also inspired by these stacked up shipping pallets that I had encountered growing up in Los Angeles, but also when I moved to New York as an adult. And I found that very interesting. So in this piece that I had made in 2017, I literally used a t-shirt, a foreign exchange brand t-shirt that had USA with sailors, anchors, crossing in there. And I thought that was like the best form to really, just engage and place, this 3.5 millimeter plastic over it, and I started, just painting over it. And the title of this piece is "Erase Me" by Kid Cudi. You know, and at that point is when I realized, marking something, marking a painting, was the center of my conversation, the center of the things that I wanted to focus on. Engaging the history of painting, engaging, mid 20th century abstraction, for instance, where only certain people were allowed to, voice their opinions, make their marks, and others were being marked, were being erased. So another way of marking that came in the form of titling, naming something for me. And that was using music by the African diaspora, from hip hop to R&B, jazz, blues, reggae, Afro beats. And in that way, these songs that I was using to title these paintings took away the self-referential power of painting, right? Where in painting, if you look at it and its discourse, oftentimes painting often refers to itself. You could look at Cézanne's paintings, these paintings of fruits, where most people would think it's fruits, but then again, it's about the paint, the color, the strokes, the gestures that Cézanne is thinking about. But in that way, taking that away and titling it with titles that refer to cultures that reflect a different society, a society that I identify with, a society with cultures that is more closely to me and those that look like me, was a very interesting move for me, and even using these titles right here. And one of the first titles I used to title one of my works was "If I Rule the World," Nas featuring Lauryn Hill. It was a hip hop track from 1996. It came out when I was a kid. And I remember listening to it in my brother's, car seat. I mean, in my brother's, front seat in his car, and that was such a popular song when I was a kid. But at the same time, it was so conscientious. It was referring to, but back then I didn't understand it, but it was referring to a way of imagining an alternative reality, a reality other than the one that we lived in, we exist in as Black folks in the United States. A reality where the lyrics even go, "If I ruled a world, I'd free all my sons." Some details of the work. "If I rule the world," and this is one of the works that I've actually never used a song title, but the lyrics from the same song. "If I rule the world, I'd free all my sons. Imagine smoking weed on the streets without cops harassing. I'd free everyone in Attica," which is a prison system, a jail, or one of the biggest jails here in the US, and send them to Africa. And like the idea of this Pan-Africanism, the idea of like this alternative reality, the imagination of a future that is different than the one we existed in, just lived in these lyrics. And by referring to those song titles as the work eventually migrated away from this mid 20th century-esque type of conversation type of work, and it started inserting itself in the same way that you see these bars crossing those gestures, in the same way that you see these redactive lines in FBI forms and documents, in the same way that you see one placing themselves into the space of painting. Also, by titling these works and engaging them within society, they came into being within our social construct, within our circles, within our conversations, academia conversations. And there's a studio shot of these works just for perspective. And I made this piece in 2019, Ghetto Superstar by Praz. I don't know if you guys know it, but it was, for me, I was just thinking about like the idea of this song being so huge in 1998, and the idea of Ghetto Superstar being like the thing, it's such a popular song, but also being the thing to title the very work that was very monochromatic, almost in reference to Ad Reinhardt's, monochromatic Black paintings, was very interesting to me, where I wanted to talk about like the power and the popularity of that idea, that that particular song, the lyrics that it referred to, but like almost like a loving kind of hip hop song that was pretty popular on the top, top charts. And coming across this form of work in 2016 for me, this cape, like royalty cape, like almost like a ceremony wear, was very interesting, where I placed these 3.5 millimeter thick plastic again, laid it out, and I started spray painting it with this blue spray paint, and eventually, when I hung it, and it just felt right. And thinking about the title, King Kunta, Kendrick Lamar, it was just so fitting, like, to bring that idea of that royalty, where King Kunta, Kendrick Lamar was referring to himself in the hood, where, even when people hate on him, even if they cut off his left foot, in this sense, he would limp with, he's got the yams, he's got that, that swag, that resilience, and he's all like, I'll limp, with that gangster limp, and keep it moving. You can't hold me down. And it was a direct reference to the character Kunta Kinte, from Alex Haley's literary novel, 1976 novel, but also embedded in the history of the Americas, right? In the history of European history, how the stealing of bodies from the motherland through the Middle Passage to the South here in the United States, and then the genealogy of Kunta Kinte, Alex Haley, which is eventually writing the history of this, and us thinking about that, but also still, dealing with these inequalities in so many different ways, subverted ways, right? And so, in a way that it exemplifies this royalty gown, this this majesticness of the elevating of the African body, the Black body. I'm also thinking about Strange Fruits, right? Nina Simone, Billie Holiday, where at the same time the body is being elevated in this particular piece, I'm thinking about this Black and Blue, the idea of the degradation of this Black body, the commoditization, the usage, the shipping of it, the usage of Black culture, the being wanted for our culture, and disregarded for ourselves, for everything else, just wanting what we produce. And so this is a close-up look of it. That was what was driving these ideas, these thoughts. So when I'm recreating this work, the shipping pallets looking objects, these much smaller for sure, when I'm creating them against this blue ground, I'm thinking about that relationship between Black and blue, where blue for me has this beautiful, like the day blue sky, where I enjoy the peace and serenity that comes from it. But then again, when you look at it through jazz musicians and blues musicians like Louis Armstrong and so forth, they're thinking, I got the blues, this melancholy rings out of their lyrics, but their expression comes through, their expression and their release comes through expressing it in within that musical context. And so Black and blue, that's relationship in itself has like so much history, even here in that way. While I find it so interesting to see the day blue sky and the night, dark sky, that contrast, but there's also this relationship of the dark skin bruising into the Black and blue that it does, but also the relationship between this Black body and the blue uniform that enforces systemic inequality. And so that's where these works were being birthed. So I had, I was grateful to have made this work for Zuckerman Museum, to have commissioned it for about a year in 2020 and hung right there. And as you can see, it's more than life size. Back to a 2016 piece where these staggered, forms that sort of resemble this shipping palette in a way, but also like these bodies that are marking a surface, right? A surface that was often denied to Black creatives to express themselves in the ways that we have in Western art, Western art, art history. This constellation of bodies and against this vast blue background, endless blue background, and so forth, just making these pieces that really spoke to those ideas. And this piece actually is currently in a touring exhibition, nationwide touring exhibition through the Smithsonian, and it last showed at CAM, California African American Museum, as you can see it on your far left. Yeah, it's fairly a small piece, but it's titled, "We Will Never Die." For the sake of time, I'll keep moving. And again, this Blue Notes, McNeil, this is a piece on vinyl, vinyl stretched onto these stretcher bars and painted from the back. And the idea of engaging these gestures, these blue gestures first, and then the black behind it. Just messing around with painting, grinding all my life, Nipsey Hussle. Just engaging these, these surfaces in ways that I have talked about in a few minutes ago, but I'm also engaging it with these titles first, where it's referring to a time that that is outside of painting, but into cultural significance, right? For us, at least. And another piece, this one was done on canvas. And this is a piece made on canvas, but cut out, where you could see the clear vinyl, and behind it are iridescent films, mylar, and whatnot. And there's like depth into it, and just the distortion of the image, and just speaking of that. And so just to go back into these again, like marking a space, a place, a society that we live in. Marking, one's mark, and then not necessarily crossing it out, but engaging it, right? Like one makes their mark and another next to them, and the way these markings exist around us is the way that I've been thinking about my work when I look back onto these years of like research and thinking about all the markings that I've come across. Has been very insightful and really fed this current body of work, one of these Black boys, in numerous ways. And thank you so much.
There we are. Great. Thank you so much, Tariku. I so appreciate your generosity. We've got time for some questions, and if you have a question, if you could put it into the Q&A facility, that would be terrific. Before we go to questions, I do want to have a shout out to Sean Lowry, who put me in touch with Tariku. So Sean, I know you're in the audience in Zoom land somewhere. Thank you for doing that. Tariku, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about metaphysics and what metaphysics means to you in terms of painting, in terms of being an artist, and where you think that shows up in your work.
That's a great question. The way I refer to the metaphysical aspect of my work is, first of all, like just directly as the non-physical, right? The non-physical gesture, the gestures that are used in society that are very invisible to mark something. For instance, the way we mark a place for ourselves is very different. It doesn't equate to physicality. It's ephemeral. It's the way we exist. And if we were to talk about stereotypes, those are also metaphysical in a sense. You get stereotyped for looking a certain type of way, and in a way, you're being boxed in and contextualized in a place that that is not necessarily the place, the way that you want to be contextualized. the way you want to be referred to. You know, in the past, there's been very negative stereotypes for people that look like me, and very positive ones too. And so the metaphysical of things, I think it gets very interesting to think about, even within the painting context, is that it's the things that live in between the lines for me.
This question has come in from Sean. He asks, do you understand the work as an experience activated in the space between the material form and the title?
Between the material form and the title. I like that. You know, I understand this work, and a work of art cannot really exist just on the physical plane. It has to exist in both. And so therefore, yes, it does exist in between those places. And the work is not, for instance, if I may share my screen one more time and just refer back to one of the pieces. For instance, this piece right here, you know, I made it in 2016, and I've shown it numerous times, many times in many different places. And every time it's shown, it's shown, it's up for 3 months, for a year, however long that is. But every time it comes down, it's destroyed. I make sure that they video or they photograph them cutting through this and send it to me as an evidence that it's been destroyed. And therefore, it doesn't necessarily exist in the physical, it exists in the idea of it. And so this work would exist pretty much by a certificate of authenticity with instructions how to remake it. And I've had multiple art professionals remake it and show it in different places, even in my absence. And so, yes, it does tend to live in the in-between, because the most significant thing is these ideas that these objects propagate.
Could you talk about how your earlier interest in the environment, could you talk a little bit about your earlier interest in the environment and how that continues in your current work?
May I ask who this question is from?
It's from Simone Douglas.
Yes, Simone knows my work, my earlier work very well. And thank you for the question. It's a great question. You know, I've had heavy interest in the environment, and you're looking at me making works with plastic, and I believe that's something different. But I think it was just the way how we should be responsible in the way we exist in the world, right? The way we care about the world, the way we care about our land, our environment, the air, the water, and all those things are marks that we will leave for a future generation to inherit, if not in our lifetime, to inherit something that's more disastrous than what we have here. So being custodians of the place that we live in today, the world that we live in today, how do we want to leave it when we enter, when we leave? And so, yes, that's a way of leaving a mark, right? We leave a mark however way we do, and the environment is also one big question that where we have to continuously engage politically as well.
Another question that's come in. Amazing to know about the chronology of your practice. I wonder what's next for you, and if it's comfortable to reflect on how the pandemic is affecting artists in your circle in America or over where you are.
The pandemic has been very interesting. The first 2 months I was locked into my apartment, just worried that I might have caught COVID here and there. Every time was like a false scare. But through that time, I learned how to engage my current circumstances by walking an hour and 20 minutes to my studio, where I found that was the place that I found rest, because even though everyone was at home and resting, it was full of unrest, right? Uncertainty. A lot of shows had canceled for me at that time, and I didn't know what the future had looked. But speaking of the future, I do have a bunch of shows coming up, a lot of group shows in many different places, and art fairs like Freeze London, 154 London, Miami Art Basel, Main Fair, but also group shows in many different galleries. But the things that I'm most excited about is also teaching. I'll be teaching at Parsons, the New School, in the BFA program next semester. And I think there's something about engaging a younger generation and students that in a way we impart some of our knowledge and experiences to them. But then again, we also learn. We learn how to coexist. It's if you're making music, it doesn't matter if you're tenor, alto, or anything else. And I know the younger generation is making some type of music in their own way. So it's always great to engage and bridge that, that difference. And so I think teaching in a way has been a very enriching experience, even in the past years for me. And so I look forward to that.
Mm. This question is about geometric symbols. And given that you have a sense of geometric symbols in the world, have you ever come across geometric symbols that hold the same meaning across different parts of the world?
Yes and no. The circle and triangle happens to be some of the most popular geometric forms that are commonly reoccurring in different cultures, religions, and different periods of time. And the circle often resembles as something as a whole, as an all-encompassing, oftentimes. And that is the same with within the Dogon culture in modern day Benin, Togo, even Ghana, the Adinkra symbols as well, but also in the Christian, in the European Christian symbology, it means very similar things. And it's interesting to think about those forms that have universal meanings. And then the triangle, also relating to like three persons, right? In Christianity, it's a deity of like the three, and in Islam, it's something close to it, but within even within other societies, something about the 3 points are like so significant. And so yes and no.
I got it. Look, the last question is about, I think it's your work from 2016 that you showed, where you had this timber construction like the pallet crate sitting on the wall with a painting behind it, almost as if the painting was caged. And I wonder whether that idea of being caged or caging art in some way is kind of part of the vocabulary that you speak. Yeah, this kind of thing where the painting is sitting on the wall and then the crate obscures it in some way. I wonder if you could just talk about containing that.
Yeah, in this particular case, this is actually on the floor, on the ground, and I was thinking, you could walk on it, but you cannot engage it, you cannot touch it, you don't have any access to it. So sort of almost like the denial of aesthetic pleasure of that lush paint behind it, but also caging could go to any type of way. But in 2015, 14, 15, around that time, a lot of conversations were happening. I was in the MFA around the commoditization of art and millions of dollars being spent on art. And I thought it was interesting to think about painting as the leading selling works, where it's moving around the world like nothing else, like no other art. And thinking about shipping pallets as the ultimate symbol for moving commerce, symbolically at least, right? And thinking about doing quite the opposite, like encaging it with this system, with like almost like denying that movement And I thought I would play around with that. And it later came back again, even 2020, 2021. I started making these works again, but on the wall this time. So I'm thinking about the painting as bodies, and in this particular case, and where it's engaging. There's a system and body engaging each other, like in this dialectical relationship, in this push and pull, like you do in traditional painting, but except, metaphysically, should I say.
Mm. Well, Tariku, we've come to the end of the session, and I really, on behalf of everyone here in the Zoom, just thank you so much. Thank you for staying up late and being with us from New York, but also thank you for your generosity and taking us through the trajectory of your career. And we wish you well. We wish you well with everything that you're doing, and yeah, many thanks to you for joining us today. And then to our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We don't take it lightly that you join us every week. And please, wherever you are in Australia or anywhere in the world, please stay safe. And we look forward to seeing you next week at Art Forum at 12:30 on Thursday afternoon. Many thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. And shout out to Sean Laurie again for connecting us, and for this opportunity to speak with you all and sharing my work.
Great. Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.